Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. 2, because I'm a fan of punk music. And 3, it's just more fun, right? If this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. Please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Tom Peters, who is, in my eyes, a legend and author of numerous business books, now 18 in total. He's also a speaker. He's perhaps best known for his 1982, which is a book called In Search of Excellence, a seminal works, which he co-authored with Robert H. Waterman Jr. And this is the third time we've had him on the podcast, third time that he's graced us. I mean, I always feel it's just, it's such a pleasure. First time was in 2018, and he joined me last year in 2020 to talk about excellence and extreme humanization. Now he's back, and I'm so chuffed. It's always a pleasure, Tom. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. You said all those wonderful words about me, but before you started, you looked down to your left, and I figured that was who the hell do I have on this morning?
I have notes in front of me just to kind of make sure. It's like my auto cue.
It was this. It was just before you started, you took a little glance to the left, and I thought, shit, he doesn't remember who's on. It's okay. I'm far too old to be put off by insults. So go for it.
So, I mean, Tom, you know what's always surprises me is that when I sometimes mention that I have you on the podcast and I say, I've got Tom Peters on the podcast, and some people go, who's Tom Peters? And I'm always aghast at that, given that I'm such a fan of your work and have followed your work for such a long time. But for the people that are not necessarily familiar with you, can you give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch about Tom Peters?
In search of it. Well, first of all, the only reason I'm here, which I believe is true of all successful people, is because of good luck. I wrote a book in 1982 called In Search of Excellence. And I think it's in my opinion, it's kind of a classic entrepreneurs, et cetera, product situation. It really took off. Everybody bought it. The timing was perfect. And so the way I described it is a pretty decent product. And then God put his hand down and said, we're going to really help you guys with this. The President Reagan was in the White House at the time. And the week the book came out, we passed 10% unemployment for the first time since the Great Depression. Mm-hmm. And suddenly, literally, in the space of weeks, business books went from the back of the bookstore to the front of the bookstore, which, of course, in the age of Amazon doesn't happen anymore. But that's another story. So we wrote about excellence, and Peter Drucker was the only management person anybody had heard of back in those days. And Drucker, who was contemptuous of all things, was contemptuous of our book. And he said, well, it's the kind of book that fathers buy to give their sons and daughters. He probably said sons back in 1982. And I heard about it and I said, oh my God, that's the highest compliment I've ever gotten in my life. But there is kind of a point to it, because Drucker, well, for God's sakes, he was a refugee from Nazi Austria, so no denigration whatsoever. but he was continental European, down the center of the line, et cetera, et cetera. And we tried to be approachable.
Yeah.
And the great leadership guru Warren Bennis said, In Search of Excellence was the first business book that was read by people other than CEOs. It wasn't written for the CEOs. It was not necessarily written for somebody who was at the literal coalface, but it was written for leaders, written for managers, but as much written for a 29 or 30-year-old manager who was moving into a supervisor's job for the first time. And it just taught basic common sense, which wasn't common in the world of business books. It said, for God's sakes, pay attention to your customers. And if you want to pay attention to your customers, then you have to pay attention to people who serve your customers, using a word that both of us like called wow. My one-liner today is, if you want to wow your customer, first you must wow the people who wow the customer. And John DeJulius, who ran a chain of salons and now is a customer service guru, said, you must remember your customers will never be any happier than your employees. And you produce them, I produce them, he produces them. There's a problem with one-liners. They're never academically perfect, but they are directionally decent advice. And so we just talked about basic common sense. We had 8 attributes. The first one was a bias for action, and it said, fire your strategic planners and find a whole lot of people who want to try something new every day.
Yeah.
And my bias, and this one does have good hard science behind it, because I'm a reasonably good data person in that regard. If you try enough stuff, your strategy will find you.
Yeah.
You do not have to go take a 2-year retreat to a mountaintop waiting for a flash of lightning, which says, thou shalt invent the iPhone. And anyway, so we did that, and people bought the book, and people asked me to make speeches. And, I now have a new book out called Excellence Now, Extreme Humanism.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said in my Twitter accounts, I'm standard garden variety greedy person, love to have your royalties money. But the real truth is this is the 19th book. I've written 19 books and they all say exactly the same thing. So
I got it wrong. Sorry.
That's all right. Hey, that's perfect. That's perfectly all right.
But I'll tell you what, I wanted to ask you about the book, though, is because when we talked last year, we talked about the Excellence Manifesto 2020, the 29 number ones.
Right.
But this new book, you've moved the number ones have expanded from 29 to 43, which sort of nicely coincides with the number of years you've been in this space and how long you've been banging the drum. Is that intentional?
Yes, that's specifically intentional. The first list was 11. You caught me at 29. It was up to 36. And we have an ebook, which is called the 43 number ones.
Right.
Now called the 43 number ones. And I thought, when did we actually start the research for In Search of Excellence? Mm-hmm. And the answer was 1978. And so if you do 22 plus 21, you get up to 43. But that's I don't think it's a selling trick, but it is to say, I've been doing this damn thing for over 4 decades. And as I say over and over again in the book, how many bloody times do I have to tell you that if you behave decently toward people, God will smile on you and let you into heaven, and he will let you into heaven with a big bank account because it works. It makes money.
So can I say that given it was born, say, 43 years ago, so that's actually in 1978, could be so bold as to say it was born out of the era of punk?
Of course, I would not expect anything less than that from you. I mean, it absolutely, positively, oh God, what was it? It was actually written in an FT thing. Oh my Lord. My brain is Sid Vicious.
Yeah.
In the FT, the conservative among conservatives, somebody wrote a review of my Reimagined book in 2003 and said, Tom Peters's lectures are a mix of, and I don't remember who, some solid academic and Sid Vicious. And I thought, other than Mr. Drucker saying dads are giving it to their kids, it was like, who on, it's like, that's the last book. I'm done. I've made it, gone as far as I can possibly go.
Awesome. That's
And
awesome.
I just love that.
And so actually, I
Does
think what I
Sid
did.
Vicious count as punk?
Yeah, no, because he was a guitarist. He was the bass guitarist in the Sex Pistols.
Yeah. I assumed that was the case, but
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and it's completely of that era. So yeah, and absolutely, that's absolutely brilliant. There's a long legacy, which is.
Well, I have a next door neighbor who is a musician, and he has played with regularly somebody who is touring, who I want to say was the Beatles' primo drummer. And I'm not going to bet my last dollar on that.
Okay.
But anyway, it's a very legit last in the line.
Excellent.
Beatle, which I think is fantastic. I mean, I don't know. I'm all Brit in that regard. As far as I'm, well, anyway, we'll get back to whatever.
So, I mean, is this? I mean, I know it's also going to like. Is this going to be the final one? Because you talked about a summer of it. So, is this kind of like this is the final one, or are you going to come back on it? Is there going to be a comeback tour?
Well, I don't know whether you know the Beach Boys, but the last living Beach Boy, I think, is Brian Wilson. Mm-hmm. And I think he's been badly abused by people with financial needs. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I went to see a Brian Wilson concert. And to use at least the American term, he's past his sell-by date.
Right.
And, I don't want to be one of those.
Right.
So that would be distressing. A ton of people have suggested that I write a memoir, which to me would be a sign of incredible arrogance. But what I do say about this book is it's a memoir. Mm-hmm. I mean, for God's sakes, I spent 43 years on the road. I've given over 2,500 speeches in 63 countries, and there are a bunch of ideas that I founded on. And so I have a good friend who's a leading social psychologist, and she said, what you've done, because she's doing the same thing, is a memoir of ideas.
Yeah.
And that term appeals to me. And so, this is it. Will I say it a 20th time or 21st time? I don't think so. I don't plan to in any way, shape, or form. And both the 43 number ones ebook and the Extreme Humanism book, there's another reason to stop now, because the pandemic is an incredible exclamation mark.
Sure.
And my wife, among many other things, entrepreneur, et cetera, is a tapestry weaver. And when the pandemic was picking up steam and we didn't have any face masks or very shortage, she and various other people started, got to their sewing machines and were doing face masks. And I thought, and I know this is a family program, I thought, what the hell is my wife doing trying to save lives? And I'm sitting on my ass. And so my good colleague, Shelley Dolly of 20 years, and I kind of noodled around and we said, let's be audacious, maybe arrogant. We'll volunteer to do podcasts, and the topic will be leadership in the times of COVID-19. Mm-hmm. And a whole lot of people, I don't want to say took the bait, a whole lot of I'm teasing myself too badly. A lot of people thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, I developed this thing. I've gotten a new book that I called my Leadership 7, always a number, for the COVID-19, excuse my voice. And the Leadership 7 are: be kind, be caring, be patient, be forgiving, be positive, be present, walk in the other person's shoes. And I said and believe, and I think there's a precedent for remarks like this, so I haven't really looked it up, that what leaders age 24 or 64 do / have done during the pandemic year is going to be the signature of their life's professional career. If you behave decently or decently plus, you get a real check mark or gold star. I use that little COVID-7, and when I'm doing stuff orally as opposed to in print, my comment is I can boil the whole thing down to 4 words, and the 4 words are: don't be an asshole. Behave well. You and I both believe that behaving well towards your fellow human beings is the best damn way to grow market share, make money, and be able to have St. Peter say you get into the good side when you pass away. But take that and multiply it by 10, and that it is said, praise the Lord, it'll be that this is a once a century event. Well, unless they have some miracle, something or other, it means you ain't going to do this twice. And so this is the magic moment. Behave well, and behave well has no limits. And what I mean by that is, you have a restaurant, you have no business for the first 6 months. You've got to close the restaurant down temporarily or permanently. You can still, and I don't mean you're a rich man, so you can give everybody $1 million bonus. You can still behave well toward people or not. There's a guy with a little business who I remember I was hearing about that's local near me, and what he did is because some of the people who were on the wait staff or the busboy staff or the dishwashing staff, were sometimes bureaucratic things were difficult for them. He did legally filled out all of their applications for unemployment insurance and made sure that they were taken to the right window in the right department. And that doesn't make their life easier, but he continued to exude or express what was true, that he did give a damn about these people, and he was going to do as much as he possibly could. And an awful lot of people have, as you well know, which has happened all over the world, any number of people who fit into the don't be an asshole category have really busted their bank accounts trying to help people, at least for a while, even if it didn't go for 12 or 13 or 14 months.
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, I know that I couldn't agree more. I mean, but the thing that strikes me, I mean, and you write about this in the book, there's you tell a story about a gentleman by the name of Manny Garcia, who's the owner of a large chain of South Florida restaurants. And he described you as being a BFO provisioner, which is a blinding flash of the obvious provisioner. And I'm thinking, I love that. But yeah, because you and I would agree that much of this stuff it feels very natural and it's self-evident, but we try and incite and encourage people to be this way, but it's like not always the case. And I think the thing that I kind of wonder about is like, why is that not? Is it that we are so conditioned to be another way, or do we have to unlearn some stuff or give ourselves permission? Or, I mean, because that's the thing that I'm really interested in, is that it's there, but then how do we step towards it? How do we start, as it were?
There are international differences, I'm sure, but I think, haven't checked it on Google, if you use the word business, this is a business decision. This isn't to be played around with. And Adrian is a real hard-nosed guy, and he's really made it as a result. All the synonyms for business are, I think, phony. Are hard talk. Well, end of the day, we got to make our numbers, and fundamentally, it's a total crock of crap. If you want to, it's what we just said a minute ago. You want to make your numbers, you're going to make sure that the people who are helping you make the numbers, whether it's a restaurant or whether it's Google, are treated well, cared for, trained, developed, so on. But then I think, I had a piece in the FT 2 weeks ago about my former employer, McKinsey and Company, and I acknowledged that my tongue was somewhat in cheek, and I said, in my perfect world, we'd close every damn business school that exists. And obviously that's extreme. And obviously I don't mean it literally, but businesses reinforce that thing that you just said and I just said, that I asked a friend of mine as a business school professor, tenure professor, I said, why don't people, when they get to business school, there is a course, at least in my school and probably most schools, on leadership and organization effectiveness and so on. And he said, listen, Tom, forget about it. He said, I love you, love your work. I was your thesis advisor. They step in the front door of Stanford and they want finance courses and marketing courses, and everything else is a waste of time. They'll take them because they're required. But they when somebody shows you a spreadsheet, they start drooling.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case. And I think we carry that. Silicon Valley has got, maybe there are a lot of rich people, it's problems today. And one of them, the venture capital industry, has gone sour. And I think that's why we have the Zuckerbergian stuff. There's no moral backbone to it. The old venture capital business, we had a guy in the Boston area called General Dorio, and there were guys like that in Silicon Valley. And so they lend Adrian $4 million to start a business because they think he's a good guy and he's got a good idea. And then Adrian is 28, 29, 31, and then they become his counselor.
Right.
And coach. And, when they're on the way to San Francisco from Palo Alto and he's in Menlo Park, they just drop in for half an hour and shoot the breeze. And now, for God's sakes, the venture capitalists, they pay no attention except the potential future numbers, and they write into agreements that they don't want to see you, period. Really? Here's your money. Here's your check, boy. Make me another 2 billion for my account. And that's utter nonsense to me on any dimension whatsoever. But business is a human activity. Mm-hmm. I've got, I don't know where I can find it. I got the book sitting next to me. We have two things we have epigraphs to the book, as books do. And there is, I don't know whether you've heard the term flow in business. There's a guy who wrote a book about flow, and my Polish is lousy, but I've looked it up on Google 1,000 times, and his name is, and this is apparently the correct pronunciation, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And it has about 100 letters, basically. But at any rate, he wrote Flow. He's written other books. He wrote a book called Good Business. And here's the one-liner. Business exists to enhance human well-being. Mm-hmm. And, period, all stop. And there are a million reasons we go astray. I don't know what they all are, but I just think probably around the world, I think our dearly beloved Germans are a little better than we are. And I think one of the reasons I did a TV show, and arrogantly, I think it was the first one that had been done in the US on the middle-sized German companies, the Mittelstand companies. Yeah. And what I learned, the thing I really took, first of all, if you had said, if I had good German, if you had used the word empowerment in front of a Mittelstand CEO, you would have had no idea what the hell you were talking about.
Sure.
He, as a CEO, had started as an apprentice and gone through an apprenticeship program. 98% of the people on the line in his tech company had gone through an apprenticeship and program.
Yeah.
And so when Tom Peters, the Mittelstand CEO, is talking to Adrian, who is only 23, I'm talking to a peer.
Yeah.
Adrian came out of that system. I came out of that system. There's, we're a couple guys and I'm more senior. And, I assure you, which is more significant to you even than it is to me, I was born in 1942, and I was born actually during a blackout in Baltimore, Maryland. And so my forgiveness toward my German brothers, and I'm actually, Peters is a German name, I'm third generation, my forgiveness is still low for what went on and was going on in 42. Nonetheless, mm-hmm. There are things that we can learn, and that was, I love the show on that Mittelstand thing. It was discovering a whole new world.
Yeah, I think it seems to me, and I think you're absolutely right. It seems to me that it's like we have to decide to set the conditions ourselves, because otherwise, if we let the conditions be set for ourselves, then we exist in, if you like, we're a product of that environment. So we actually have to decide what environment we want to set, and then that will then nurture the right sort of like
Yeah.
behavior.
Well, I think that's true, but I think people such as the business schools, or even you're not going to go to business school because you can't afford it or you don't want to spend 2 years, but you do need to know basic accounting, which I will acknowledge.
Yeah.
And somewhere, including online, you take an accounting course. Well, damn it, I think the accounting course ought to focus on the moral dimensions of accounting. For God's sakes, most of the business problems we have been people who have messed around with numbers.
Sure.
Including the 2006 crash. And I think everything that is involved in business ought to have, I mean, I think it was implicit in what I've been saying for those 43 years. I have worked my butt off in my current book to make it explicit.
Yeah.
There is a moral dimension to every damn thing you do. And if you are a leader, and in particular, if you are a business owner, it is, in my opinion, the same level of moral responsibility, or at least 93% the same level as you have towards your spouse and your kids.
Yeah.
It's a moral act. You're serving people. You know, my one-liner, which I have far too many, is business is about people serving people, serving people. Mm-hmm. Leaders serving employees, who in turn are serving their customers. And it's about people, it's about service, it's about moral responsibility. And then a funny thing happens and your bank account is bigger at the end of the year than it was at the start of the year, assuming you're not going through a pandemic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the one thing that's the other thing I wanted to point out as well, and to share with the listeners, is that it's not just about a book. You've also been developing a whole set of course material, because I asked about kind of like taking steps and everything else, but actually there's going to be a whole set of kind of get your fill of Tom and kind of waxing lyrical on this sort of stuff for the next kind of 12 months and more. So tell me about the courses, and like kind of, is that just kind of you going, come and listen to me bang my drum?
Well, it is to some level, because as I've said all morning, I've been banging my drum about the same 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 things for 43 years. Large numbers of people, younger people in particular, are much more comfortable dealing with video than they are with print. B, it's not in my background, it's not in my training, but I've been giving speeches for 43 years, and I am said to be a very good speaker. And
I'll testify to that, having seen you speak, by the way.
Yeah, but when I do something on video, it's, you know, and I had good producers and so on, camera persons and so on, but I do a pretty decent job. And 3, and I think 3, I think in a way, in a video, it can be in your face relative to this emotional stuff like moral responsibility. Yeah. If I'm serious and I have some degree of people respect for me, and I am staring you in the face, and I'm not screaming at you, but I'm saying in no uncertain terms, look, you know, you hired Adrian, you have a moral responsibility. And, you know, the way I talk about it these days is, if Adrian only works for you for 6 months, 6 months from now, when he leaves, he should have learned things that will serve him well for the rest of his career. Not an MBA, not a PhD, not an engineering degree, but he should be better prepared to go to the world, out in the world 6 months later, you know, even if it's that slow a thing. So, you know, we have a program. The program consists of 6 courses. In total, the 6 courses, and this wasn't by plan or choice, have got 99 individual steps, and there is a little video, usually 2 or 3 minutes for each of the steps, and then there's another teeny video of what do you do. We call them the to-do videos, right? And so, you know, but it's a lot of small chunks, and, you know, I've spent an awful lot of time on it. My colleagues have spent an awful lot of time on it, and I think it's a pretty decent piece of work. putting it out immediately or the first course on Udemy, but we're going to find another jillion ways to see if we can get it out. And frankly, I use PowerPoint slides in my presentation. Every set of PowerPoint slides that I have used around the world in the last 15 years is available at tompeters.com.
Yeah.
My goal is to, I care about it. So my goal is to give away as much as, we did one, which was a 27 chapter, 4,096 slide, 150,000 words of annotation and explanation. And it's available for free in this instance at my other website, which is called excellencenow.com. And I'm not trying to send people to websites in the sense that it's not a damn thing you can buy there.
Well, I mean, I tell you what, I will send people to your website and take a look at some of that sort of stuff because it's a wonderful, wonderful resource. And, and if people haven't seen you speak, then you should get on Google and on YouTube and search for kind of like how you can see kind of like Tom in action for like from historical stuff. And if that gives you a kind of a sense of kind of like how good the course is going to be, then you should sign up. Because so, Tom, I mean, first of all, I also want to say is I actually kind of also like the book and how it's gone kind of more design heavy this time as well, which all reminds me of kind of like these sort of ones. There's kind of David Hyatt book, kind of like, which is a do purpose, but then also this one, the Paul Arden one, which I don't know if you know this.
Yeah, I do.
This Paul Arden one is probably one of my favorite books of all time because it's just like an adrenaline shot in the arm. But I really appreciate the ideas like there's a real design aesthetic kind of to it.
Yeah. Well,
I really liked that.
Well, I actually, yet another of my UK Brit connections. There is a regular management column in the Financial Times. I think Adrian Hill is the one who does them now. And I came over to the UK with some regularity, and I met a guy, he died very, very early, Chris Lorenz. And Chris was the management guy at the FT. And I'm trained as an engineer, so design is not a word that I understand or can even spell. But Chris wrote a book called The Design Dimension.
Right.
And it was fabulous. In fact, I was thrilled and privileged to write the introduction or forward to the paperback version of the book. But Chris got me started. And the main things, and this is your turf at least as much as mine, is design is not about pretty. A guy by the name of Donald Norman wrote a book called Emotional Design. And the one liner I took out of it and have used in my last couple books is he took a review, I think it was in a US paper, but he took a review of, and I think I'm getting this right, of the Mini Cooper 6, I think it was. Maybe I'm wrong. At any rate, he took a piece out of a review and it said, "No new car has made so many people smile." And that's from your standpoint and mine equally, that's bombs bursting in air. That's that's the point. And then and Johnny Ive, who was the former Apple chief designer, and again I use this multiple times in the new book, said, and he used these terms, he said, "I know it's kind of bold or maybe arrogant, but our goal is to maybe try to make the world just a teeny bit better." And and I think that's a legitimate goal for someone who has a two-person accountancy in London or Munich or the United States or Bangkok. And I think it's a goal at the big company level. But A, design is not about big companies. B, design is not about pretty. It's about engagement, and it's about emotional connection, and it's about and it is. I'm right with Johnny Ive. Maybe I haven't made it, maybe you haven't made it, but the effort is to try to, bring a couple of smiles and make the world just a teeny weeny bit better.
Well, can I suggest that and everything that you've done, and particularly the new book, The Excellence Now, Extreme Humanism, actually what you're inviting people to do is to design a different way of being?
Yes, that is a bold, big statement, and I do not disagree with a single letter, punctuation mark, or what have you. Yes, that is absolutely positively it. And that takes us also back to our Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who said business is about human betterment, or is meant to be about human betterment.
And you know what, Tom? Last time I asked you about your punk words and brands and things that were on this, because it was aligned to that Punk CX, and you said that when I asked you use two words to describe what a punk approach to customer experience would be, you just said be kind. And I think that just sums it all up. It's where you start. That's the design process, as it were. You start with being kind to kind of each other and to your kind of fellow colleagues, and then it rolls on from there. And
I think it's a wonderful word, and we probably don't use it in general as often as we should. But there's a great American novelist, Henry James. I don't remember what the novel was, but the quote which I use: 3 things are important in human life. The first is to be kind, the second is to be kind, and the third is to be kind. Mm-hmm. And yes, and
stop.
Yes, period, full stop.
You know what, Tom? I think that we should just leave it there. Drop the mic.
I think you're right. I could not agree more wholeheartedly. Yeah.
You know what? And lastly, so I just would like to say, personally, I'd like to thank you for the work that you do and the work that you've done, and for sharing time with me, because you've been an educator, a guide, an inspiration to me personally, and to many other people. But I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I'm so honored to be able to support the launch of the new book and spreading the word about the new course and everything else. But being part of that invitation for people to design a better way of being.
Well, you closed our on-air part with a single simple sentence, and to respond, my entire response is thank you.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. One final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.